It's my pleasure and honor to present to you Count on Us, a very special 100th anniversary video presentation. Hello, I'm Dick Korpan, Chairman and CEO of Florida Progress, and I'm proud to be at the helm of this company as Florida Power Corporation completes its first century of service. In honor of our 100th year anniversary, we've put together a history of some of Florida Power's greatest achievements, the contributions made by individual employees. They have created a legacy of commitment that defines this great company today. Join us as we look back at our first 100 years through the eyes of our people. It's my hope that you find as much pride in our rich tradition as I do.
It began 100 years ago. A company and a way of life. How we got here, from there, is a story of commitment.
The electric light bulb, the incandescent bulb, changed the world. People become accustomed to having a light that they didn't have to carry kerosene to it. They didn't have to have gas to run it. They could go over here and pull a switch or flip a switch and get it started, and they were in business. They had electric lights. Well, the first thing they did, they brought electricity to the South to manufacture ice.
In the early days, the ice business was really more critical than the power business. My grandfather's job was to help solve problems in the ice plants around the system. Ice had to be made 24 hours a day, or mainly the cold storage facility, because all the farmers who butchered cows, all the meat markets and everything, they all had meat lockers where they kept all their frozen food.
The ice was made in the ice plant, and the mules were drawing the wagons, and they'd pull the wagons up to the platform, and they'd load the ice on these wagons, and these wagons would be delivered around.
The iceman would walk in your house, he would put the ice in your refrigerator, in your ice box, and leave, and you might not even see him.
I could see that all the time the trend was going out of the ice era into a new into a new area, which was the electric.
The first contract with St. Petersburg for power, which was signed in 1896, was to provide electric lights, 30 lights, 32 candle power each, from sunset to midnight.
Well, when they put the street lights in, people started seeing them and said, well, can't we have them in our house? And they dropped one single light down from the ceiling in each room. No plugs on the walls or nothing, just that one single light hanging down. Usually had just a pull switch on it. In the very beginning, when the ice plants was generating electricity and selling it to outside, they only generated from dark until about 9 o'clock at night. But as the people began to get appliances, the manufacturers started making electric iron to begin with. That was one of the very first things. The ladies had to iron at night. Well, they didn't like to do that. They wanted to iron in the daytime, so they went to the power company and said, can't you generate your power starting earlier in the day, in the daylight hours, so that we can iron during the daylight? And that's when one of the things that started them to run in 24 hours a day.
At first, electricity had driven the invention of appliances. Now, appliances would drive the demand for electricity. Life was better at the end of a cord. Company showrooms made it clear.
As far as these electric ice boxes were concerned, we'd get them in from Westinghouse, and they'd be on our display floor, and people would come in. They'd have the ice boxes at home, but they'd heard about the electric boxes, and they wanted to see what that was like when you'd open up that door and you'd have your ice in there all the time. Then I could see right away that one of the first things I wanted to do was to get my mother an electric stove and an electric refrigerator. And that's what I did, and she was very proud of that. she thought it was so wonderful. She says, I just wonder why we didn't have these years and years ago. Why weren't they invented before? I just feel like that I was fortunate in working through an era of time that I was a small part in making life easier. I came to work in August 1st, 1925. We had progressed from oil lamps and candles to electric lights, and by flipping on a switch, and it was up to us to do all we could to help promote that.
The Great War was over. Prohibition was dead, and Florida was a party in full swing. It was a time when nothing could slow the growth.
What they called the boom days, and they started building sidewalks and streets and laying off plats for things like they was really going to town.
Real estate, some of them, they say, would change hands 2 and 3 times a day. There was just an influx of people, and they were buying this real estate and building homes. It was up to us to furnish the power.
Generation capacity increased, and in 1926, a low-pressure steam generator was added. The Turner plant's state-of-the-art power was needed. As Florida's small communities grew, many outgrew their ice plant power companies. Florida Power stepped in.
Well, when it had consolidation of these little utilities and little municipalities were bought up by the bigger companies, the first thing they had to do was to build a power line from the power plant to these cities so they could serve them.
The conditions were much different than they are now. The equipment was more antiquated. Back then their line trucks were Model Ts, and they had to build this transmission system across wild Florida, swamps and waterways, fight alligators. It was quite an adventure.
Well, I believe the old days, personally, they were the men that built this company.
Line cowboys. They raised the poles and strung the wire, and like the rest of the company, it seemed nothing could slow them down.
But of course, as you know, in 1929, the Depression came, and all of that stopped.
One day they were busy selling real estate. The next day there weren't any buyers.
Expansion came to a halt. Employees took a pay cut, but all held on to their jobs.
During the Depression, we sold appliances on the installment plan, and the customer was billed the monthly charge with electric, along with the electric bill.
The company survived, and in 1938 had its best appliance sales year ever.
Well, we had radio back in the early days before World War II, and we knew that the war clouds were forming on the horizon over in Europe, and we knew that the war was imminent. And whenever Franklin Roosevelt would come out with what he called the fireside chats, everybody would gather around that radio intently listening.
Today, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America.
The nation responded. So did Florida Power. Over the next 4 years, nearly half the company's workforce would join the fight. A new group of workers stepped in to take their place. Many were trained by Evelynne Gordon.
During the war, all the military, Coast Guard, and Merchant Marines were down here training. St. Pete was just full of them, and a lot of their wives came down with them. And those wives wanted to go to work. And if we needed someone right then, we'd take them. And all the girls in the billing section came into a dressograph first, and then moved over to the billing machines, and then went into pre-audit. Well, when we took over for the boys when they went in the service, I think all of us were very proud of what we were doing, because it was something that needed to be done, and there was no more men around, so who else was they going to have? And all the girls, we worked as a team.
Coming out of World War II, the nation came out as a united group. That lesson stayed with all of us. The importance of being united in an objective, the value of teamwork, the value of commitment, the understanding of the importance of sacrifice, and the concept of duty. Well, in our company, during the post-war period, we faced an enormous challenge. Florida was growing rapidly. It was up to us to provide the electric service for, at one time, about 60,000 new homes a year. That's a lot of challenges. Challenges from a legal standpoint, financial standpoint, engineering, construction, maintenance, operation. A lot of subsets of challenges. So there was a challenge for everybody. But this was a gang that was used to responding to challenge.
Between 1944 and 48, Florida Power managed to double its generating capacity, then doubled it again in just 5 years, and doubled that in the next 5. Bayboro, Higgins, Swanee, Bartow, Crystal River. Expansion pushed on the seams of the system, and if the seams failed, it fell to the men of the travel crew to hold the line.
About 2-3 months after the Crystal River one went on the line, they had a leak in one of the roof tubes, 14 stories up. And the only way we had access to it was to go in through the hopper and drop a cable down through the roof. It was hot enough in there to bake a potato. And miserable, sweaty, and come to find out they had all these clinkers and stuff hanging on the wall. We had never had any experience with a coal-fired unit. We didn't, oil and gas, you didn't have that problem, you know, this stuff hanging from the walls. So anyway, we'd start on up, and every once in a while that rope would hang up and that chair would go to spinning, you know, just a cable sitting in a little bosun chair. You know, there's no way you could hold yourself in one position. Got up there and I pulled the grinder up and grind the hole out that I had to weld back up. And I lowered the grinder back down to them, and then I pulled my welding lead up and welding rods, and I did manage to fix the leak.
Early one morning, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from a supervisor that we had a substation burning up. We rode over to Quincy, and when we turned there at the railroad track, all the towers had melted and collapsed. Transformers on fire, breakers on fire, everything burned up. And a guy had come in there and planted dynamite on the side of the transformer, blowed it up. And about 30,000 gallons of oil rushed out of there all over the substation on fire and started blowing up some of the circuit breakers, which had about 700 gallons in each tank, and they started blowing up. About daylight, my supervisor says, "Well, Geech, you better call over to Monticello and get the crew. Let's build this substation back." By that afternoon, there was semis out of St. Petersburg rolling into Quincy with towers, breakers, transformers, everything that you could think of, imagine, would build a substation. But we built it back in 12 days, 12-hour days. To the best of my knowledge, I think that's the only substation that ever was built in 12 days.
They were Florida Power, and they did whatever it took. So did their families.
If they went out at night, they were alone, and you were apprehensive about it. I can't say that you worried, but it was always in the back of your mind because you knew the dangers involved. In their way, they were all rather rugged heroes.
A lot of meat eaters get bit by dogs, but I got bit by a bantam rooster, and it was a vicious bantam rooster. So he jumped on the back of my neck and spurred me, and I hit him back there with my hand, knocked him off, and then I kicked him. And I hadn't seen that rooster since. And I hadn't. In 1952, when I went to work with the power company, we had our 200,000 meter. And a few years before I retired, we celebrated our 1 million meter.
What made Florida was one thing, air conditioning.
And we'd get right up close to them, right real close to them, and put our face right up against it, just drink in the cool air that was blowing on our perspiring faces.
I got around the back of the house, and there was a little old bitty thing sticking in a window there. and it was just churning away, making all kind of noise. I said, that must be an air conditioner. I've never seen one, but that must be what it is. And I looked at the consumption of the kilowatts that they had made and how much it was going to cost them. And I said, nobody but the richest people will ever be able to afford this. And how wrong I was.
In the 60s, even the sky was no limit. Florida focused on the distance to the moon. Few thought about the distance to the past.
Live better electrically was sort of a motto for us at that time for all the electric companies. We felt like we were really helping people. That was what I liked about Florida Power. It was the service that we could provide to the customer in whatever it happened to be, whether it was in kitchen planning or designing the lighting for a new home. This was a close contact with the customer, and they really felt appreciative that we took that extra effort to help them.
Back in 1973, Florida Power was supposed to be, if not the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing utilities in the United States. At that same time, we were building our nuclear plant at Crystal River 3, and because of delays and the tremendous need for power, we installed a large number of peaking units. Luckily, in the early 70s, the world was awash in oil, and we were able to get all the oil we needed at very economical prices. When the prices went up so tremendously due to the oil embargo, one of the few choices we had to cut oil prices or reduce expenses was to convert Crystal River 1 and 2 back to coal.
When the oil prices started going up, we got lots of complaints. People would come in and they'd say, I just can't stand this, my electricity has doubled twice.
The two major effects of the oil embargo was that oil was in very short supply and it was difficult to obtain. And the second was that prices were increasing literally daily.
So then we saw the need for something to help the customer with these high bills. And so the company set up a job called Residential Energy Conservation Manager. And I was put in this position, and it was my job to design methods of saving electricity. So this was kind of a shock to all of us to have to change our tactics and just, instead of saying live better electrically, we were saying live better by doing with less.
The oil crisis led to the formation of Electric Fuels Corporation in 1976. The goal for the new company was very clear: provide Florida Power with a reliable, long-term supply of competitively priced, high-quality coal. In order to do that, we had to set up an efficient and cost-effective transportation network, and it had to be established in a short period of time. Each year, millions of tons of coal are needed at Crystal River, arriving both by rail and by barge. That gives Florida Power more flexibility and cost savings that Florida Power can pass along to its customers. 30 years ago, the world suddenly had reason to fear there might not be enough power. Maybe the public forgot that, but we won't.
Revolution came to the line in 1958.
In the beginning, people weren't too thrilled about the Aerobasket truck because the rumor had it that it would eliminate linemen's positions, which it turned out not to be true. And the normal method of operation was to climb poles using the linemen's climber tools and safety belts. And where we used to have to stand at the end of a 12-foot fiberglass hot stick, now you could do it with your hands because you were standing at the end of that hot stick, which was the bucket truck. The truck became the hot stick, and the man became the tool at the end of the hot stick.
Florida Power was one of the first in the nation to embrace the new trucks, reorganizing operations to improve safety, increase efficiency, and reduce service interruptions. Using technology to better serve customers, it's a Florida Power tradition.
My grandfather started with the company in 1929, and he worked with a device on the transmission system called a hot stick that allowed him to work circuitries hot. And so he got the nickname of Hot Stick Johnson. When my dad came along, he was an engineer with the company, and he worked with a slide rule, which is called a slipstick. So he got that nickname, Slipstick Johnson. Well, I come along and I work with computers, and so people have given me the nickname of Joystick Johnson. Altogether, my family has served 70 years with Florida Power. And I'm very proud of that fact.
You have your good times out here like anything. You have your good times, you have your bad times. You know, when you have the bad storms come in here, sure, it gets really rough. And the rough gets going, you know, you just got to do what you got to do.
In 1985, we had a couple bad hurricanes in the same year, and it tore us up pretty good.
One of the main things that tore up was this distribution line going across to St. George Island. The only feed we had to St. George Island at that particular time. We have a different one now, but in 1985, this overhead line was all that we had. And when we came over here to survey what the storm had done, most of it was gone.
They had to set these poles, and the way they set these poles was they tried with line trucks first, but these are all oyster beds out here. They tried to drill it, tried to dig it with a truck, and just couldn't do it. So they had to get a big barge out of Panama City. But while they was doing that, the company put some generators on the island so the people could have lights.
We manned those generators. We built some lines from the generators to feed the feeders over there.
Then we rebuilt this line. Took us quite a while.
And we worked from November on into February, getting this line put back up and getting service back to this island so that people could live back a normal life.
When a company's values are strong, the best of the old remains new.
It used to be when you'd look out from this tower in the late 70s, you'd see nothing but citrus groves as far as the eye can see. Now primarily what you see is fresh new rooftops coming out of the ground. And that's all the new people that have moved to South Lake County because of the natural beauty that South Lake County has to offer. And what we're doing is to prepare for that growth by planning for additional substations and upgrading transmission and distribution facilities. So we are investing in our community as it continues to grow. We've recognized that our growth and success is tied closely to the growth and success of our communities. Florida Power has had a tradition over the years of not only allowing but encouraging its management and employees to get involved in the communities.
Well, I was president of the St. Petersburg Exchange Club. I was on the board of directors of Chamber of Commerce, and during the war I was a coordinator between the electric utilities and the armed services.
There was a toy shop that helped the poor, and we always have a lot of poor. And at Christmas time, the children wouldn't get anything, so they started this toy shop, and any toys you didn't want, you gave to the toy shop, if they're broken or not, and they were all repaired.
Back in those days, remember the line department helping with the erection of light poles for football fields and Little League baseball fields and things like that. I had the opportunity of working with the March of Dimes, raising money to help with the research on polio.
Helping others, it's a tradition that built communities and companies too.
We have a senior associate who has been very ill, and on our customer relations team, we decided to come up with an idea of Casual Day to help raise money, and the whole center's participating, and it's really been a great success, and we support each other every day as we take escalated calls and deal with our customers, and it's really nice to be able to support each other in other ways as well.
Working together, it has enabled Florida Power people to achieve much in the last 100 years.
We started construction on January 19th, 1998. Normally to build out a data center of this size takes about 18 months. We were able to accomplish this in 5.5 months. And the primary reason for being able to do that is the dedication and commitment of all the information technology employees that made this possible.
Every business unit within Florida Power has a dedicated team of employees who have been working to make sure that we successfully transition to the year 2000. We've got a long history of sort of planning for the unexpected. Y2K contingency planning is no different. It simply builds on our existing contingency plans to make sure that we're adequately prepared and that we could deal with any issue that might occur.
The electric utility landscape is constantly changing. Industry restructuring, deregulation, and consolidation are forces that continue to drive changes in our business. Over the last few years, we've taken steps to improve our operations and better position us to compete in tomorrow's changing marketplace. I know we'll be able to meet whatever new challenges will come our way. And the strongest reason for this belief is the legacy of a commitment handed down by each generation of Florida Power employees.
For the Lane family, Florida Power commitment has spanned 3 generations.
All the time I was working and my son was growing up, I used to take him to Florida Power and show him what I would do during the day and night. And then when I got to be a night troubleman, I'd bring the truck home and he'd go out and climb on the truck and I'd give him a ride in the bucket. So he always wanted to work there.
To me, it's the greatest company there is.
Well, I wanted to join Florida Power because it was basically a family tradition.
Florida Power has always had a very strong family atmosphere, and I think that's really only continued to grow over the years as we've developed more of a team concept.
When you said you worked for Florida Power, that meant something.
We were all proud to say that we worked for Florida Power.
When I worked at the dispatching office, it was always an honor just to walk in the door.
Back then, that was our job, was to keep the power on.
The customers can depend on us and count on us, and they have for the past 100 years.
The work of Florida Power employees is important. Has always been important, always will be important.
There's a lot of jobs with the power company, and every one of them means something, and every one of them's important.
I don't think there's ever a morning, as long as we work for Florida Power, that we didn't get up and want to go to work.
We all had a sense of a commitment to get the power going at all times. And now, although the technology is more sophisticated and we didn't have the tools back then as they have it right now, the new employees, I feel they have the same sense of commitment.
We never close. It's total commitment to customer service.
You flip the light switch or when you turn the computer on, that it does in fact come on, and that's why we say you can count on us.
Florida Power crews, I think they're the best there are, hands down.
Our job is to provide power from our generating plant right to their house.
And we know that if we don't do our jobs to the best of our capability, that someone's going to go lacking for something that they dearly need, and that people count on this service from the moment they wake up in the morning until the time that they go to bed.
Those of us in the business have been part of something bigger than ourselves, and I think that binds us together in a special way. We're not just any business, we're a power company. And over the last 100 years, we've been an important part of the changes that have shaped our world. Through all the changes, one thing remained constant. Our customers could count on us.